Good morning, and welcome to Orange Coast Unitarian Universalist Church. My name is Joel Ibanez, and I'm your worship associate today. I'm joined by Reverend Sian Wiltshire, our minister, Beth Syverson, our director of music ministries, and Karen Magoon Pearson, who is our director of religious education for children and youth, in welcoming you this morning. We also would like to recognize the many volunteers that have helped put this service together today. We also respectfully recognize that our church property rests on Ahachimin and Tongva land. As Unitarian Universalists, we have many different beliefs, but we are one loving community. We are bound together not by a common set of rules or beliefs, but rather a covenant. A covenant is simply a promise that whatever our beliefs, we accept one another and encourage each other in spiritual growth. We affirm that all life has inherent value and that all existence is interconnected. We strive for justice and compassion in our deeds and relationships, and we are committed to creating a welcoming community without regard to the traits that sometimes divide people. To our roomers, we invite you to silence your cell phones. And for our Zoomers, we invite you to say hello in the chat. I want to extend a special welcome to visitors. If you are seeking a spiritual home, we hope that you find it here. Later in the service, we'll have an opportunity for you to introduce yourselves, so if you'd like to do so, please do. We begin our worship here with the lighting of the chalice. And this morning, I'd like to invite Tatiana Hauser up here to light the chalice. Where is Tatiana? Did she step away? There she is. Hello, Tatiana. Tatiana has been a friend of OCUUC since 1919 and a member since 2020, and she's very active with our effort. Yes. And very active with our effort to house Ukrainian refugees next door. So, with that, as she lights the chalice, let us say our unison affirmation together. Love is the spirit of this church, and service is its law. To dwell together in peace, to seek truth in love, and to help one another. This we affirm together. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. We're going to start with our opening song, When Our Heart is in a Holy Place, by Canadian Unitarian Universalist Joyce Pulley. Please rise as you are comfortable.
Trust the wisdom in like my anthem or something. I don't know. I love that song. So this morning, we're going to be talking about some fun stuff, and I just want you to know that this is brought to you by our wonderful block family over here, Alan and Gabby, who won this topic at the auction in the fall. And they asked me to talk about freedom of speech versus some of the things like the Stanford list. If you don't know what that is, I'll explain it. So we're going to be learning some new words today, new ways of putting things. And so I thought we would open with these words by Sam Trubor. He wrote this. He says, "Teach my heart healing words. Show me the words that help rather than harm. Instruct me in the verbs that bring energy, the nouns pointing to the real, the adjectives describing your subtleties. Reveal to me how words can be offered in a way that connects rather than separates, that develops trust and eschews suspicion, that opens the heart and relaxes the mind. Amen."
Look up there, high above us, in a sky of black and silk. See how round, like a cookie. See how white as milk. Call it the moon, my son. Say moon. Sounds like your spoon, my son. Can you say it? New words today. Say moon. Near the moon, brightly turning, see the shining sparks of light, each one new, each one burning through the darkness of the night. We call them stars, my son. Say stars. That one is Mars, my son. Can you say it? New words today. Say stars as they blink all around us, playing starry-eyed games. Who would think it astounds us, simply naming their names? Turn your eyes from the skies now. Turn around and look at me. There's a light in my eyes now, and a word for what you see. We call it love, my son. Say love. So hard to say, my son. It gets harder. New words today. We'll learn to say. Learn moon, learn stars, learn love.
So since we're going to be talking in part a little bit about freedom of speech, I thought it might be good for us all to have a primer for our Time for All Ages today. So let's see what this is about.
This is Greta Thunberg, and this is the Swedish Parliament. Thunberg is 15 years old, and she is doing a school strike for climate. Sitting there alone, she is smiled at and even insulted. Some say, go back to school. Others tell her to give up. But she doesn't want to listen and continues. And soon, there are a few others who like her ideas and admire her commitment. And then, one day, the local press comes, does an interview, and Greta's photo goes around the world. The few that joined Greta soon became many, and many became millions, and in countries all around the world, young people began expressing their opinions about climate change because they want to build a better future. Greta used rights that are laid down in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Accordingly, everyone has the right to express their opinion freely and to meet freely and peacefully with others. So what exactly is freedom of speech and where does it end? Freedom of speech is a principle that supports our freedom to articulate opinions and ideas without the fear of retaliation, censorship, or legal sanction. It protects all forms of communication, from speech to text to art, and is a constitutional law of liberal societies. Freedom of speech includes having access to information to prevent censorship and limits state control over what we should and what we shouldn't know and say. It means freedom to express an opinion regardless of whether the opinion is justified or unfounded, emotional or rational, valuable or not. And it means you are also allowed to remain silent and say nothing at all. One form of expressing your opinion is forming an assembly, which usually begins with two people who come together with a common purpose. But freedom of speech has its limitations. For example, it doesn't mean we can state something as a fact if it can be proven wrong by objective standards. So when Greta says the global biosphere is being sacrificed so that rich people can live in luxury, she expresses an opinion because her claim cannot be objectively verified. But when she begins a speech with, "My name is Greta Thunberg, I am 15 years old, I am from Sweden," then that's a factual assertion because you can check if all that's correct. In other words, the first statement is protected by the freedom of speech because it forms an opinion. Greta introducing herself is nice, but it's not protected because it is just a factual statement which can be verified. Also not protected is insulting others or the assertion of untrue facts. Freedom of assembly also has its limits. Gatherings must take place peacefully and must not jeopardize public safety, which can happen if people bring arms or riot and become violent. So Greta is allowed to sit in front of the parliament with posters, but she is not allowed to smear the building with slogans. Greta used her freedom of speech to inspire millions to help put climate change on top of the political agenda. And while we certainly want more people to stand up for what they believe in, many of us live in societies in which expressing one's opinions isn't possible. So what do you think about freedom of expression? Do we need more? Do we need less? Where does it start and where does it end? Share your thoughts in the comments below.
All right, there's our primer. That's our story for today. Let's sing our children. I'm going to invite Karen McGuinn-Pearson. She's our Director of Religious Education for Children and Youth. She's going to light our the children's chalice, and then we will sing the children out to their religious education classes slowly. No, or fast. So our reading today is by a gentleman named Maurice Mitchell. There's a picture of him there. He's the National Director of Working Families Party, which is a political party. And he wrote a rather famous piece back in November called Building Resilient Organizations. In that, he unpacks some of the problems that he sees among progressives who are working for social justice, that there's a lot of infighting and we're just not getting things done. And so he names a lot of things. And our reading today actually comes from a conversation that he had about this with Lulu Garcia Navarro on a New York Times podcast. He wrote this. He said, "I've witnessed identity, whether it's someone's gender identity or racial identity, one's position, whatever it is, being weaponized in ways that were not useful for the work of progressives. For example, I'll use myself. I'm the son of Caribbean immigrants. I've been in conversation where we would be debating ideas, and then I might stand up and say, well, as a black son of Caribbean immigrants, I think the organization should support candidate A. And then that would move the room in one direction or just shut down debate completely, when the thing that we needed most was to continue the debate. Someone might ask, but am I not centering myself? Am I not saying where I come from so that people have a better sense that my experience informs my opinion? He says that is not the problem. It's not a problem to state your identity, only in how you employ it. Oftentimes people use that phrase to do the opposite of opening up. People use it to close down and to suggest that because I have these identities, that this is a mic drop, and my identity in itself establishes the legitimacy of my position, whereas your identity is a jumping off point that could create greater awareness, more connection, the possibility of deeper curiosity and solidarity. Oftentimes people are misusing that. And look, I'm black. So is Clarence Thomas. So simply elevating my black identity as a totalizing argument for the legitimacy of my ideas is, I think, a misassessment. Oftentimes, though, people front load that because they want to be taken seriously, especially when in a group of white people. And there's a sense that they need to be listened to. And there's ways that that can be done and should be done, and ways that I think are productive, but we run the risk of overcorrecting. As a black person, it does no favors to me for me to say, as a black son of immigrants, and then for white people to sit on their hands and shut up. I need to be sharpened by debate. I might, at the end of the day, think you're wrong, but I need the back and forth in order to sharpen my position or change my mind. It's my job to sustain the risk of possibly feeling really, really uncomfortable or having somebody maybe call me out. It's my job to sustain that risk in order to pursue a real and durable conversation that sharpens everybody. I think that this lack of debate lets white people off the hook because they could suggest that they're performing some form of solidarity by remaining silent, when the most uncomfortable thing to do, if I was a white person in a debate around racial justice, is to stay in the debate and run the risk of being wrong, run the risk of offending somebody, but staying in the debate and staying in the relationship. So it's not the debate, but it's how we hold it. It's not the debate, it's how we hold it. So I want to invite you into a time of just contemplation this morning. If you'd like to get comfortable in your seat, I'm going to ask some tough questions, see if you want to think about these. Deep breath. So my question for you, how comfortable do you feel debating with a person of color or a different person of color about racial justice? How comfortable do you feel arguing with a person of color or a different person of color about racial justice? Here's an interesting question. I did that long reading written by Maurice Mitchell. But how might you feel if that was written by someone who was white? Would it change how it impacted you or not? A little louder. All right. Thank you. So if you read that, but you thought it was written by someone who is white, would it change how you felt about what you heard or not? When you're ready, join Beth in singing. So hey, did y'all hear that I'm learning how to play the banjo? For those of you who are new, that's sort of a little bit of a joke with the congregation. But what I haven't told you, or I told some of you, but not everybody, is that I'm not only learning the Irish tenor banjo, but I'm also learning classical guitar. It's just me. Now, learning classical guitar, I just heard it and I was like, this is the most beautiful thing ever. I've got to learn this. So I'm learning both. And the nice thing about the tenor banjo is that I'm starting to get it. Like, it's starting to come to me and I understand it. And Robin, my teacher, honestly, he lets me get away with a lot. You know, I'll stumble over things like, oh, that's good enough, you're good, right? But Carla, my teacher for classical guitar, will not let me get away with anything, okay? I'm not very relaxed at it. I stumble on notes, right? I don't get the rhythm right. I'm not smooth. So I'm loud, sometimes I'm fast, sometimes I'm slow. All those sorts of things. I flub up all the time. And every time I do, she's very sweet, very supportive. She's like, you're doing great, Sean. Now let's start over again. Or go back a few bars. We'll start there at the beginning of that line. And she does it until I get it perfectly smooth, which is like actually teaching me how to practice. It's actually really kind of cool, right? She's a great teacher, and I'm very much enjoying it. And as a matter of fact, one time I was practicing the guitar, and now at this point, as soon as I flub up, I'm like, okay, going back a couple of bars, and I'll do that over again. And I started laughing. And she said, you know, Sean, I'm so glad that you're laughing because so many adults that I teach in particular, they get so frustrated and angry. And it sort of got me thinking about how we as adults, how hard it is for us to learn something new, right? We're used to being good at stuff. We've gotten competent. That's what adulting means, right? Is that somehow we're competent at life. And when we have to learn something new, we don't like that we don't know something, right? So either we get really defensive or embarrassed, right? We get kind of ashamed, we get defensive, we pretend that we know a thing. Oh yeah, I know what an arpeggio is. Sure. So that we, so that we actually, can sound like we know what we're talking about. But as adults, we somehow expect that we should know things, right? Even things that we never learned. I never learned about arpeggios. I knew it was a musical term, but I didn't know anything about it. And learning is hard, and not just because of our egos are there to, in our culture, right? Our egos get in the way. We don't want to seem bad. But our neural pathways, right, in our brain, they're used to doing things a certain way. When you have to create a new neural pathway, it's like, no, but it's so much easier over here. Go this way, right? And so like I was talking with Mariana, who's one of our Ukrainian refugees next door, and she was talking, I was saying, how's your English going? And, in her halting English, she said, oh, it's fine. Then she said, my daughter, who's 6 years old, she's in school and she picks it up right like that, right? Because she doesn't have the neural pathways already set about language, right? That's something that we struggle with as adults. So I want to ask you, have you ever had to learn something new as an adult? Maybe it was a new job, maybe it was a hobby you have, maybe it's becoming a parent. That's a whole new job. I want to ask you, how did it feel at first? I'm guessing pretty awkward. How long did it take you to be good at it? How much time did you spend time learning it? Are you still learning? And what kind of support did you get around it? So as a nation and as a culture, we're in the middle of learning new ways of doing things. And let me tell you, the adults are getting really defensive and angry about all this learning, while younger people, honestly, they're just totally taking it in stride. They're like, yeah, I don't care, new genders, new whatever, all that, right? Let's take examples, pronouns, right? It takes practice to get pronouns right sometimes, particularly if it's non-binary. But even, when I think about, my niece who's trans, every once in a while, particularly when I'm thinking about the past, when I knew her as a different gender, I might misgender her, right? Because you will make mistakes in these things. There's no getting around it, right? It takes practice to learn something. You will flub it up, you will not be smooth, you will not be relaxed, you will be uncomfortable. So just go back a bar or a line or two and start over again, right? So if I'm speaking of my niece and I refer to her as a him, I just say, oh, I mean her. Don't make a big deal out of it. Just go back a bar, right? And transgender and non-binary people don't mind if you mess up so long as you either correct yourself or take the correction with grace, right? Think of Carla. Oh, you're doing great. Just go back a bar. They get it. They know it's hard. You think it's easy for them too? We're all learning. So here we are, we're all learning new words, or rather new words to replace old ones that sometimes used to call harm. And I think that given that everybody in this congregation are good people who don't want to do harm, who want to be kind, right? It's really hard to think, oh shoot, something I say might cause some harm. No one wants to do that. And so this brings us to this thing called the Stanford List, okay? So the Stanford List, has anybody here heard about this? It came out in November. Some people here have heard about it, other people have not. Okay, so the Stanford List was put out by people of color of the IT department, with also the standards and practices people at Stanford University to help people at Stanford University when they're creating their online content that showed words that they believed might cause harm and then gave some alternatives. Now, this was not Stanford policy, and it was meant only as guidance. It was not mandated at all, but it still caused a lot of controversy. And while the vast majority of the words on the list are really good examples of this word causes harm, so consider using this word instead, there were some words that were suggested as causing harm that people were like, what? Are you serious? So hence the controversy. So I want to go through some of these things. I want to say that there's some really good points from this list. One of the things that I learned about is something called first-person language, okay? I love this. Person first language means that you concentrate on the person first. So rather than saying they're confined to a wheelchair or wheelchair bound, my mom, I used to say that all the time about my mom, right? She had MS and she was wheelchair bound. We say they're a person who uses a wheelchair. So my mom used a wheelchair, right? Rather than saying, oh, they're mentally ill, you say a person living with a mental health condition. It's a great way to refer to my cousin. Slave, I thought that was an interesting one. A person who was enslaved. Or immigrant, a person who has immigrated. I personally do you hear the difference between naming the person first? It doesn't then make everything about them that one identity, right? I was thinking about this when we think about our refugees over next door, right? It's easy to just say, oh, they're refugees, Ukrainian refugees, right? But when you get to know them and you get to find out that they're award-winning photographers and they're all these other things, by putting it first, saying they're a person who is here as a refugee or something like that, then it somehow makes them more real. Like, oh my gosh, what did they leave behind? What did they come from, right? So nouns tend to define the person, right? Same thing with stereotypes, they tend to define. And adjectives are only a descriptor. And I thought this was absolutely fabulous. I love this. I want new ways to be kind, right? I know I'm gonna flub it up, but I'm gonna try, and I'm going to practice using this person first kind of way of speaking. To me, it's also a great way of affirming and promoting our first principle, right? Which was that we affirm and promote the inherent worth and dignity of every person, right? When we name someone as person first, we give them that dignity and worth. So rather than convict, we can say a person who is or was incarcerated. Here's one you don't hear much about: conservatives. How about we say people with conservative views? Here's one that I'm really trying to get rid of: old white male. How about a person whose unconscious approach to the world is from a patriarchal and systemically racist culture? It's a mouthful. But I really don't like how that really reduces people, right? Down to this one thing. So person first, all right. Now, there are some problems with the list, and everybody points those out, like all the press were all over the problems of the Stanford list without noticing some of the really good things. So I want to bring up those problems because I think it actually talks to a lot about what our culture is going through and the decisions that we have to make around language and what words we use. So one of which is, for example, that language actually evolves, right? It changes, it grows, right? It may not have the same meaning. Did you know that the word silly used to be, back in 1200, used to mean actually blessed with worthiness? That's how you might describe a nun, right? Things change, they transform, right? So the question is, if it caused harm in the past, do we still use it? So here are some of those words. So brown bag it. I've always known this to mean like, hey, we're having a meeting, why don't we meet around lunchtime? Everybody brown bag it, bring your bag, bring your lunch, right? That's what everybody thinks about, right? Well, it turns out that this was actually a term used by black sororities and fraternities to determine whether or not someone was light-skinned enough. If they were darker than a brown bag, they were not allowed into the sorority or a fraternity. And this was internal racism going on. Another one that came up it's on the list, is called hip hip hooray, right? Everybody's like, what's wrong with that? It was used by the Nazis. But it had a history long before the Nazis, right? So people are like, and there's probably very few people alive who might even remember that hip hip hooray was ever used by the Nazis, right? Hold down the fort. I have used this with the staff when I'm gone in the summer or something like that. Hey, hold down the fort for me, right? but according to the Stanford list, it brings back ideas of Native American genocide, and it uses violent language, right? But that's not how we use it today, right? Another problem is that some of the words make assumptions about the use of the word as well. So here are some words that are on the list that we're told that we shouldn't use, which really surprised me. So one is American, okay? So the idea is that there are 41 countries in all of the Americas, and so by using the word American, we're saying we're dominant and over everybody else or something, which I think is absolutely ridiculous because we are United States of America. It's our name. It's part of our name. We could say I'm a United States of American, but it's just really long mouthful, right? Now, someone from Honduras or Brazil do not say I'm Honduran of Central America, or I'm Brazilian of South American, right? I'm a South American Brazilian. They say I'm a Brazilian or I'm a Honduran, right? This has to do with our name, not necessarily that we're dominant. And we aren't the only ones who use it. Around the world, people know when they say American what that means. And they know what Brazilian means, or Honduran, or whatever it is, right? Another one was to not use the word trigger warning, because it can cause stress for people who might get triggered. You're supposed to say content note. I'm like, okay. Another one is white paper, okay? Because it assigns value of good to whiteness, which subconsciously racializes, right? But the term originated from the point where government papers were coded by color to indicate distribution, with white designated for public access. So now we're kind of assigning meaning to these words that they never had, right? And I think it also is a little bit amusing that they say that white actually, denotes goodness, because white is not exactly a good word these days. So, yeah. My personal favorite is Seminole, because it's actually male-dominated language, and I'm going to let you think about that one for a second. It's not a word that I have a degree in Latin, okay? And I didn't know where that originated from, okay? How do we take these words that, it's kind of a little bit odd, but how do we take these? Do we go to such extremes that we now parse every single word that we use? And I don't want to go to that place of hyperbole or whatever, but you can choose what you feel like will be harmful or not. And I feel like some of the things that happened in the Stanford list went way over the line. And of course, also, not everybody agrees with what's on the Stanford list, right? If you're, for example, there are some people who identify as African American versus black. They prefer African American. Others prefer black, right? Same thing with just about every other type of person of color. If you're talking about indigenous people, right? Is it indigenous people, Native Americans, Indians, or do you use a specific tribe like a Hashiman or Tongva or Ute or Dine? What do you do, right? And every single one that you talk to will have something different to say, okay? So I think it's safe to say if someone looks hard enough, they're going to find something they don't like, right? And we kind of have to be okay with that. We can't cater to everything and everyone. As Maurice Mitchell said in our reading, we can't use these words as weapons and stop debate or conversation, right? We're not going to always agree on what's good or bad words. And we could use our fourth principle, right? Our fourth principle, which is the free and responsible search for truth and meaning, to decide for ourselves, okay? What some people point out is that the problem with the Stanford list is that it failed to consider the context and the motivations of people. It treats people as if their intent is to cause harm, and then it also trivializes truly harmful language from those who intend to cause harm, right? If you're making a big deal about all these sort of minor things here, what about the really, truly awful, horrible, heavy-hitting words that are truly heinously racist, ableist, sexist, homophobic, hurtful words that are inflicted on people? But it does provide some new language that we can learn to cause some less harm. I love person-first language. I think that's beautiful, and I'm all for that. So take from it what you will. I thought there were some good examples in there. There were also some kind of like, okay. But I think the reason that people got so bent out of shape around the Stanford list is that when you write something down, right, you give people a do this, don't do this list, it tends to make people feel like it's code or it's law, right, when it's not. And it wasn't in their case at all. But it does take away nuance or context. And this approach to doing things where you're trying to codify everything, this is called purity politics, okay? So purity politics requires strict adherence to a particular set of beliefs or values over compromise and coalition building, often leading to factionalism and exclusion from a movement or group. Maurice Mitchell from a rating, he calls this something similar. He calls it maximalism, which is considering anything less than the most idealist position as a betrayal of core values and evidence of corruption, cowardice, lack of commitment, or vision. Right? So that if you don't get something right, depending on who you're talking to, then you aren't pure. Then you are out, you are bad, you're racist, sexist, homophobic, misogynistic, transphobic, whatever it is. Right? And unfortunately, this way of looking at the world is about exclusion, right? Is that what Unitarian Universalism is about? No. Oh, come on, a little bit louder. No. Thank you. It's gotten to the point that compromise is no longer acceptable, right? I do think there are places where we draw lines, but it's gotten so sharp these days. And I think about all the compromises that the LGBTQ community has to put up with and are putting up with until, for example, that they got marriage equality, right? First, we just worked on some basic rights that you can't be fired, you can't lose your housing, that sort of thing, right? Then there was don't ask, don't tell, right? Not perfect by any stretch of the imagination. Then came same-sex unions, and then certain states, and then finally it became national. And even though we're still working on a lot of rights for very many people, it took time. And it sucks that it took a long time. It sucks. You would think that it would just like people get over it. But you have to meet people where they're at and move them along. And having so much idealism that you refuse to even do the smallest thing that moves you forward is going to cause problems. So example of purity politics or maximalism is something like, you're not a true progressive if you don't support X, Y, Z. You're not with us, then you're against us, right? I can't work with you if we're not 100% committed to our cause. You're not an ally if you're not willing to insert. Maybe be arrested or whatever it is. If you're not willing to call out XYZ person or group, then you're part of the problem. Another one might be, hey, if you're an environmentalist, you can't eat meat. Or you're racist if you don't actually engage in anti-racist work. And notice how racist is not in the first person first speaking. How about this one? If you don't wear a mask, you don't care about people. I have to admit, I'm done with purity politics. I'm done with maximalism. It's another word for self-righteousness and exclusion, for dehumanization. I'm done with the name calling, right? I want person first. My theology is about love. It's about the dignity and worth of all people. And I'm okay with watching my language and making sure I get it right and how I interact with people, that I live that out. I live out my principles. But not to the extent that I think I'm better than everybody, because look how woke I am. Our former US President Barack Obama said, he said, we can't completely remake a society in a minute, so we have to make accommodation to the existing structures. This idea of purity, and you are never compromised, and you are always politically woke and all that stuff, you should get over that quickly. The world is messy, there are ambiguities, people who do really good stuff have flaws. Here's the thing, we have to allow for grace and forgiveness, right? We have to allow for grace and forgiveness. We need to let go of being defensive and angry when we're corrected or asked to do something. We need instead to get curious and just embrace the learning. Practice it. You're going to flub up. It's okay. I flub up all the time. But some people suggest that this woke language stifles freedom of speech, and I personally don't believe that. But the way that we handle it, shaming or blaming or it's all or nothing, that does shut people down. But no one's denying your right to say what you want to say. You don't have to like the Stanford list, right? You can use words that you want to use. This is a free country, but there is, free country, but there is, there's consequences to how we use. And that consequence might be just hurting someone's feelings. So right now, we have freedom of speech in this country, and I hope it stays that way. But for me, the Stanford list, whether it's that or CRT or being woke or knowing the right thing to say, is not about getting it right? It's not about being pure or woke. For me, it's about kindness. It's about kindness, right? It is the practice of kindness is what we're talking about, not wokeness, not purity, kindness. I personally have no problem with learning to be kinder, and I wish that was the approach that people took with a lot of this, right? If you look back at the Stanford list, it says this is a list of things that may cause harm. What if it said, here's how you can be even kinder than you are? How might that approach the way that we're doing things? Wouldn't that be much more wonderful? And we need to extend that kindness to ourselves as well, because we're gonna mess up, we're gonna flub. Just go back a bar or two and start over, right? And congratulate yourself for practicing, because this is hard. And learning new words is good. And you may know what the moon is, you may know what the star is, but we're always learning what love is. So learn moon, learn stars, learn love. And join Beth in singing.
Please rise in body or spirit as we sing A Sacred Place. What makes this place a sacred place is not some anxious role, no relic gold or a statue cold or painting, but the kindness shown at every hand, the smile on every face, and the love we bring and the joy we sing make this a sacred place. What makes this place a sacred place is the fellowship we share, our listening, our word of cheer to show how much we care. A kiss to greet and fresh we meet, a heart to fond embrace, and the love we bring and the joy we sing make this a sacred place. What makes this place a sacred place is our journey toward the truth. Those in the room and those unseen, the angels and the youth, each giving all they have to give and taking all they need. And the love we bring and the joy we sing make this a sacred place.
Unitarian Universalist congregations are fully self-supporting, meaning that members and friends raise all funds for the operating budget, ministries, and programs of the church. We are ever grateful for your gifts of time, treasure, and talent. OCUUC amplifies that spirit of generosity by sharing one half of the plate we receive with an organization that shares our values. This month, we're sharing the plate with Stand Up for Kids, a nonprofit organization dedicated to sharing for homeless and at-risk youth by assisting them with housing support, mentoring, drop-in centers, and street outreach. As we celebrate this special day for mothers, let's all work together to create a new way of life and culture by sharing with this organization that provides an anchor for these kids. There are multiple ways in which you can support the church and the organization. You can mail a check, you can go through our website, or use an app called Vanco Mobile. The choice is yours. All the information is on our website should you need it. As always, thank you for your generosity.
Our offertory response song, We Gather Together. This is a song that puts our intentions into words and expresses our gratitude for the many gifts we share. Gather together, we gather as one, for peace, love, and justice for everyone. We give from our hearts to show that we care. We can change lives with what we share.
Now, Now, of course, is that time when we honor the important events and people in our lives, and you are invited, one and all, member, friend, visitor, to participate in this ritual we call Joys and Sorrows. If you'd like to, this is Bertie Reed, who is one of our pastoral care team members. She'll be here to assist with lighting candles and to light candles for those Zoomers online. And the idea is if you've held something in your heart, something from last days, weeks, or hours, and you would like to honor that by lighting a candle. It's a way of embodying it, right? And people online, you can obviously light your own candle. But if you'd like to share this with the congregation, you don't have to share it. You can just come up and light a candle. Or you can write in the chat, light a candle for me. But if you'd like to share it, you can write it on a piece of paper that the ushers have, if you haven't done so already. A couple people over there would like it. And if you're a Zoomer, you can write it in the chat, and I'll then read those out loud. So please come forward, light your candle, and then I'll read Joys and Sorrows out loud. Well, given that today is Mother's Day, we have a lot of joy from mothers and mamas everywhere. So Hannah Anderson she said, please light a candle of love and gratitude for all the mamas everywhere. And in fact, Francie Coleman has dedicated these beautiful flowers She says, to moms everywhere in every shape and form, happy Mom's Day. Maureen M. has a joy. She says her daughter Corliss and her husband Jesper are visiting. We hiked together this morning and the wildflowers are still wonderful. Awesome. Linda C. says, please light a candle in celebration of my joy of being a mother and stepmother, and for all the women in my life who have contributed with compassion and love to my life and loves. Hannah A. also adds that she would like a candle of clarity and hope to improve the challenging relationships within her family. That can be really hard. Meg W., who's sitting there in the back with her boot on, she says she has a joy. She just got back for an amazing tour of Morocco that she and Elaine did together. She said it was a wonderful country, beautiful culture and people. Food was outstanding, but the sorrow is that the last day of the tour, she tripped and fractured her fibula. She's now wearing a boot and may need surgery. She says, huge thanks for our tour leader, Khalid, for all the caring and planning that he did to get her home safely. He was a treasure. She says he was a gentleman. Let's see here. All right. Make sure I've got everybody else on here. By the way, did you know that May is Nurse Appreciation Month? So Marilyn Giss is not with us today, but she's our congregational nurse, so send her a little bit of appreciation when you get a chance. All right. And Judith S. says she lit a candle of joy being able to mother her two sons. She says Corey turned 34 a few weeks ago. He is so happy to be a member of this congregation, and we're really proud to have him too. And Dolly lit a candle of joy. She says, I am pleased to be Meg's transportation today. She said, however, I'm afraid that I have now created another nervous passenger. And Craig P., he lit a candle of joy for mothers and a mother that mothered one of today's ushers. Gee, I wonder who that might be. She said, and drove up today from Oceanside to be with him and us. Yeah. I love it. Welcome. And Donna M. says, I'm so grateful for my mother today. She said she passed away this past December at 95 years old. She said, I am in awe of her as a human being. She created a cool human being too. Yeah. Let's see, and Elizabeth K., she says, as a teacher, I have an endless supply of children to love and hold dear. Please hold in your hearts one of my precious children who is going through unimaginable family issues and recently got pulled from school, though CPS, and taken to a safer place. Oh, yeah, well, that's hard. And Mitzi T. lit a candle of sorrow. She says, my partner, may he find some peace and strength through the loss of his mother, especially today on Mother's Day. And not all of us have mothers with us today. And Dave C., he lit a candle of sorrow. He said, for the death of his cousin, Mary Ann Bloomberry, that passed away yesterday. I'm sorry. Karen K, I believe, said when my, no, this is a different Karen R. She said, when my 14-year-old grandson was asked if he had any allergies that his school staff should know about in buying food for a cookout, he answered, I'm allergic to racists, homophobes, and anti-Semites. And the staff said, okay, well, there are no people in the food, so you should be fine. Oh my goodness, that's awesome. Oh, I do want to acknowledge something else that I think many people may be holding in their hearts today. If you read your email this week, then you know that there is some sadness coming up, is that our wonderful Director of Music Ministries, Beth Syverson, is going to be leaving us in September to pursue a new passion that she has, and she's become an expert in adoption issues. She's being asked to, go to conferences and speak, and she runs a podcast, and this is a new calling for her, and we're really excited for her to do that. So it isn't until early September, and we're going to have lots of opportunity. I want to encourage you to give her all the love and appreciation. We're going to have a party. We're going to celebrate all of that and her ministry of 22 years with this congregation. So it's both a joy and a sorrow. Yeah. All right, let us hold in love all the joys and celebrations and all the hurts and sadness, whether they were spoken or they remain silent in our hearts. Let our joys remind us to be thankful, our concerns remind us to hope, and our sorrows remind us to connect with one another. Let all these moments remind us that we are not alone. So please join Bertie in a spirit of prayer.
And Reverend Sean has selected today a prayer for all who mother by Victoria Weinstein. We reflect in gratitude this day for all those whose lives have nurtured ours, the life-giving ones, who heal with their presence, who listen in sympathy, who give wise advice, but only when asked for it. We are grateful for all those who have mothered us, who have held us gently in times of sorrow, who celebrated with us our triumphs, no matter how small, who noticed when we changed and grew, who praised us for taking risks, who took genuine pride in our success, and who expressed genuine compassion when we did not succeed. On this day that honors mothers, let us honor all mothers, men and women alike, who from somewhere in their being have freely and wholeheartedly given life and sustenance and vision to us. Amen and blessed be. Thank you.
Okay, let us join together as we extinguish the flame of our chalice and say together, we extinguish our chalice, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. Thank you for joining us this morning. We are a congregation made up of people who all believe differently, and yet, when we gather together, whether we are in the room or on Zoom, we make up one loving community. We need not think alike to love alike. If you are a guest, a visitor, or someone who hasn't yet been known to us, I invite you to become a part of this beloved community. We encourage you to either write in the chat if you are a Zoomer, or if you are a roomer, to stand for a brief moment and tell us your name and where you are from. We will bring a microphone over and hold it for you so that Zoomers can hear your name. So would anyone like to stand and introduce themselves? No? Okay. All right. If you'd like to know more about our church, including programming for our youth and children, please contact us at hello@ocuuc.org, and we will help you get connected. In addition, we invite you to sign up for our weekly email called Blast at blast.ocuuc.org. We want everyone to feel a part of this beloved community, so please reach out and we will help you get connected.
All right, and announcements for all the different things that are going on in the church. You can see there's lots going on because there's always lots going on, kind of amazing. Some things I want to mention to you, particularly in the all-church events coming up. So first of all, we've got a new group forming. It's called a Life Changes Group. It's meeting on Tuesday for the first time on Zoom. And the idea is that if you are going through any type of life change, any type at all, and you would like support, to come to this group, and support will be given to you. It's a nice way to show kindness. We also have our wonderful auction is coming up. Yay, so that's next Saturday. It's going to be a lot of fun. Yes, you can get your, the catalogs are out. If you want a paper catalog, it's out there. It's also online if you want to do that. That's right. So Jolene over there has them. Zoomers, it's online as well. If you go to our website or email Jolene, and she'll send you a PDF of one as well. So come here next Saturday, but make sure you get your ticket to be able to come here and everything. If Zoomers, if you need tickets, contact auction@ocuc.org, okay? The other thing that I want to mention, also next Sunday, so that's Saturday night is the auction, right? Or late afternoon. And then on Sunday, we're going to be having a potluck here for our Afghani family. We jokingly call them the cozy family because we can't say their names. But this is a family that this church, believe it or not, is only a few of us have been involved in because that's the way that it works. But they, you get to meet them, this wonderful Afghani family that we've been kind of sponsoring and supporting and helping out. There are 9 of them. They're absolutely wonderful. And so we want to invite you to sign up for the potluck. Right? You're all going to sign up, go to Judith, who's out there, Judith right there in the purple sweater, see her and sign up to bring something for the potluck. All right. We've learned a lot today, I hope. We've learned new words like learn moon, learn stars, learn love. Let us sing our benediction.
Let us go out and do our part. Let us go out, bring joy to each heart. Let us go out with indifference to joy. Let us go out with joy. Let us go out and all do our part. Let us go out, bring joy to each heart. Let us go out with indifference to joy. Let us go out with joy. Let us go out with joy. Let us go out with joy.
Woo. This service is over. Let our service continue.